He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is the Alex Marlow Show.
All right, big Alex Marlow Show today. We got peace breaking out across the Middle East. We got more insane discoveries by Doge and the Democrats not knowing how to react to them. But we'll start this show like we start pretty much every other show, the plane crash. Unbelievable.
Plane just crashed into you. Oh my God.
Is there any other response other than that? Oh my God. It's all you really got. It's a Delta plane. It's not really funny. I laugh sometimes when things are uncomfortable. It's one of my toxic traits. I've got myself into trouble doing this a few times. It's really bad. There's another plane crash, Delta flight that landing in Canada, I guess, and just coming in way too hot, just coming straight down. Doesn't it sort of feel like the nose is up a little bit when you're landing, and typically, and that just seemed like it just came straight down. Landing gear broke off, wing broke off, plane flipped upside down, and then apparently everyone's going to be okay. Well, there's 3 people in critical condition, so we don't know if for sure no one will have died. The pilot's name as of the time we're recording the show is not known, which always makes you suspicious. There's something going on over there. Maybe not world's best pilot. I think that's pretty clear. So be very interesting to see. I don't know. Maybe it's one of those strapping naval pilots just retired. Maybe it's one of those people, or maybe someone else. I don't know. We'll see. You can read between the lines where I'm going with that. But we'll see. What very, very interesting that we keep seeing these. Someone sent me a super annoying video that had a recipe in it, and the guy was making jokes about making fun of people who applaud when the plane touches down on your domestic flight, and how it's annoying when people applaud when the plane landed, let's applaud. And I feel like I've heard that joke nonstop for 20 years, and some guy's still making it online. I'm thinking, man, we need to get some new material. I guess it's going to be okay to applaud, right? I mean, it just seems like I don't want to fly anymore. It'll be really interesting to see if there is some level of travel and commerce that tapers off. This stuff continues. So 8 casualties, 1 child badly hurt so far, but somehow this Delta plane is... Maybe no one dies in the end, but wild stuff. We'll give you the latest at Breitbart News. And of course, immediately this becomes fodder for the hysterical left. Mehdi Hassan, who used to be at MSNBC and has just recently quit to start his own thing, or maybe got pushed out. He probably got pushed out. An extremely radical guy. And he said, "Make American planes crash again," was his response to this. I think it's a joke, obviously, and I think he's trying to blame... Not a joke, but like a tongue-in-cheek thing, not to be taken literally. But I guess his point is that, and this was a reaction to a different plane crash, a small plane crash at Georgia. So I think his whole point is that I guess Trump is making the planes crash. So in Trump's 3 weeks in office, he's making the planes crash. So people are dunking on him online. Remember, he was the guy that Ryan Gradusky, who's a extended family here at Breitbart News, someone we like quite a bit, is a conservative strategist who's on CNN, and he made a joke about Mehdi Hassan's pager bomb going off, and then he got basically fired from CNN. I don't think he was paid, but he was banned from the network. So Hassan has gotten in trouble in the past for homophobic remarks. He's gotten a type of guy who calls people who just support Trump Nazis, and continues to get elevated as some sort of a luminary on the left. So just know that. So he's a bad guy, and that's what he was up to. Great reaction to that. So I guess that was a different plane crash, but just shows you how frequent these things are. So it's still the left sees Trump everywhere. The left sees Trump everywhere, even planes falling out of the sky. Okay, so big news, serious one to get to at the outset. The U.S. and Russia taking first steps towards what will hopefully be peace talks. We've been touching on this a little bit on the show recently, but there's a summit in Riyadh, which I don't think is by accident. Marco Rubio was there, Waltz was there, and Witkoff were there, some of the top guys in Trump's administration, meeting with Sergei Lavrov and others from a Russian delegation. And it's noteworthy that Europe and Ukraine were not represented at the summit. So in Saudi Arabia, with Russian and U.S. officials starting to broker what could be the end of a war. I think the main takeaway here is this does reveal that this all was a proxy war between Russia and the U.S. That's what this was about. It was not really about Ukraine and Russia. It was about Russia and the U.S., which of course connects to my unified field theory that this was all about NATO membership and NATO encroaching on Russia's territory and space. And that's really what it was about from the start. Of course, way more complicated than that, but that was initially where it came from. That was kind of the kernel, the nut of it. And so that makes sense that was how things are going to get negotiated. So we have a lot of reporting on this at Breitbart, checking in with everyone. It's a developing situation. But the first round of talks, I think Russia and the U.S. seem pretty positive, happy coming out of it. It's going to be a bit of a slog. It's going to be hard negotiations, but the initial positioning, I think, shows that people are they want this to happen. They want a peace to happen, but we don't really know what was said quite yet. So we don't have a ton of details and what actual red lines were drawn, things like that. And as we know them, I'll continue to bring them up for you at Breitbart.com and on the show. But it'll be interesting to see where Russia's rhetoric comes into play. You know, they talk about Ukraine and Zelensky as if they're literal Nazis who are in Europe. And so that's how they refer to them. And I know there are some of these, you know, the Azov Brigade is certainly a mixed group over there, you got to say, in Ukraine. We'll see where the red lines are drawn. We don't know yet, but it was most noteworthy that the talks are underway. They seem to go well, and Europe and Ukraine are not a part of them. So we're just negotiating around them. Europe would seem to be very upset, but Rubio then threw them a bone, said you guys would be included in future talks. Waltz came in and was the bad guy here. He's the bad cop, as our Oliver Lane put it at Breitbart, saying that, hey, you guys weren't good NATO members. You're not paying your fair share, so you don't get a say until you do that, which I like that positioning. And so Putin and Trump haven't really gotten into it yet. Trump's on the golf course, which I also don't think was coincidental. But I'm really interested that this took place in Saudi Arabia, because I think one of the things that Trump is going to try to do, and this could be one of the most sophisticated parts of his agenda, is trying to counter China with a Belt and Road alternative. Belt and Road is China's debt trap diplomacy that they do to make it so that they are basically dominant in global trade and also simultaneously protected from foreign adversaries, because all of these people owe them money and they're working together on infrastructure. And this makes it so that China is sort of untouchable, and it'll reduce their level of criticism. It'll reduce any sort of physical threat to China, and it'll make it so that other countries are developing at sort of an anemic pace while China develops at hopefully for their sake, at a quicker pace, not hopefully for our sake. But that's been the trick of Belt and Road. It is one of the signature pieces of Xi Jinping's policy. And I think Trump is starting to look at ways to counter that. He's going to have to do it very subtly. Boyle writes a lot about this for us at Breitbart News, about this thing called the IMEC corridor, where you're looking at really that sort of region that includes it includes the Middle East, it includes Cyprus, it includes Italy. India. So, and it's all these sort of Abraham Accord countries through Greece, and all of this could be a avenue for trade, where if the U.S. is able to dominate, especially if there's Saudi buy-in, because Saudi's incredibly wealthy, especially per capita wealth, very high, very ambitious people, and seem to be sort of gettable politically, even though not necessarily permanent allies of ours, are very gettable in terms of partners for international relations going forward. And if we're able to forge a new trade policy where we are able to somehow I guess wriggle Russia away from their ties to China to some degree, and we're able to work closely with other parts of the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and Saudi Arabia in particular, all of a sudden we could be forging a real new paradigm when it comes to global trade. And now China could be challenged because they're really starting to dominate the planet. And we're talking about Africa and South America as well, not just the Asia Pacific, where China is dominant and ascendant right now. So I'm trying to move and I think there's a lot of leverage here because I was talking to Boyle about this on our Fight Club interview that's out today about how it used to be that the focal point of global communism was Moscow, and now it's Beijing. And perhaps this is something, if pointed out to Putin in the proper way, could be something that's useful for us, and it could be something that could lead towards massive progress. So I know a little wonky on the policy stuff when we're in the very early stages, but I want to put this on everyone's radar because this could be one of the biggest paradigm shifts geopolitically that we see during Trump's administration. And I think that there's a lot of, diplomatic infrastructure being laid down at these talks. So looking at those subtleties, who's in the room, who's not in the room, where are these things taking place, are sometimes more interesting than the content itself. The content is often very vanilla, what comes out to the press. So, and it takes form over a longer period of time. All right. I got some footage. Let's see what Rubio was saying. We got some footage of the event. Play a little bit.
Yeah, again, I'm not going to negotiate or talk through every element of the disruptions that exist or have existed in our diplomatic relations and the mechanics of it. Suffice it to say that President Trump has pledged and intends to keep his promise to do everything he can to bring an end to this conflict. We cannot do that unless we have at least some normalcy in the way our diplomatic missions operate in Moscow and in Washington, D.C. And so we need to work to improve that, and we're going to work with them to see what's possible within that context.
Does that include removing Lavrov from rescinding sanctions that have been imposed?
We're just not at that level of conversation yet, but so that's there'll be a
Yeah, the media just wants to amp up any sort of tension with Russia. They like that. It's it touches their erogenous zones when they do that, and there are complaints in the media about how we're bullying Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine is irrelevant here. Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, claiming on CNN that Trump administration is bullying Ukraine and to give up lots of natural resources in exchange for continued U.S. support. Now, Ukraine should be desperate for us to broker this peace because Trump will get along well with Ukraine relative to anyone else. Biden did not make Ukraine's life any easier. And they're going to have to play ball, a lot of ball here, because we're not in the we're not going to move any closer towards nuclear war with Russia. I'll tell you that. All right, so I got a really interesting email from listener Sky King, who says he was super interested in priority gold, and he should be, because now is perfect time to buy gold. There's a lot of volatility going on. It's going to take a while for Trump to implement all of his policies, and one of the best ways to protect your wealth is with gold, specifically with priority gold. And I told you guys that I'm not going to bring advertisers to the show that I don't fully back and think are doing terrific work. Priority Gold is one of those groups. We worked with them for years at Breitbart before they joined this show. And he asked me, when you give out a number, what does that mean? Freedom at 24999. It's this simple. You take out your phone, you send the text message, type in the word freedom, and the number is 24999. You don't need 7 numbers. You don't need 10 numbers. You don't need a country code. All you need to do is text freedom to 24999, and Priority Gold is going to send you a free wealth preservation guide. It's going to help you shield your savings. And even though Trump is going to be able to reverse a lot of the bad stuff Joe Biden's done, it won't be all of it, and it will not happen overnight. So now is the time to lock in. Let's diversify your wealth. You've got options to do things like gold IRAs, which are really smart to do in terms of tax purposes. And they've got all sorts of information once you go over there. You go to PriorityGold.com, and you'll learn so much about why gold is a great place to invest. These guys are good. They help me out a lot. Incredibly communicative people. They want to help you do the smartest things with your money. I genuinely believe that. So you text freedom to 24999. If you can't handle that, go to PriorityGold.com, and then you'll be supporting a couple of good causes. You'll be supporting yourself, and you'll be supporting the show. Can't thank you enough. Check them out. All right, next big item, also a serious one on the agenda today, is CIA's flying surveillance drones over cartels in Mexico. This is a big development in terms of fighting the cartels, and it's why it was so important for us to designate them as terrorist organizations early on. The cartels are very violent. Obviously, they're leaders of the drug trade and human trafficking that goes in the United States. It's completely evil. We've allowed for them to exist to this point with allowing them to co-opt much of the government. But there's a lot of weakness there as well. And I think if we're able to use strategic initiatives, then I think that we're going to be able to very quickly be able to do a lot of damage to them. And using our intelligence is a very good development. I talked to Brandon Darby, who's our Cartel Chronicles editor, about this, and he was very positive about this. And he's the number one expert I know on this issue. And it's a nice progression from just labeling them terrorist organizations to being able to actually use some of our capabilities, considering that, to just put those in place right away, using our intelligence, prioritizing threats on our border from the CIA is just great news. We talk a lot about in the Breitbart Virtual Newsroom how the CIA is run by all these Ivy League people who never get their hands dirty, and they don't take seriously the amount of massive drug deaths that have taken place in a lot of ways. I'm not saying they're not amazing people there. I'm not. It's not a black and white thing. You see the point I'm making, but they've just completely ignored massive drug deaths for the last 20 plus years coming through Mexico and into our country. And now we're in a place where we're going to get our hands dirty. We are. What I think we're going to end up seeing is a targeting of underlings. And we're going to be able to buy them off. We're going to be able to co-opt and turn them into assets pretty easily. And then we might end up seeing these letters of marque and reprisal, as Mike Lee came to our show to talk about just last week, which is an amazing interview. If I say so myself, if you guys want to check that out, wherever you get your podcasts, just from last week, scroll back. It's not that hard to find. And he goes through how we can send pirates down there. So people loosely affiliated with the U.S., but not directly under the U.S. government control, who might be able to get away with a little bit more. And I just like the idea that we're starting to use tactics that, maybe the ACLU is not gonna love. And I'm fine with this, because we need to start thinking about not putting the cart before the horse. And by that, I mean, we need a secure border, and we need to have these cartels wiped out, really. And if we're not going to wipe them out ourselves, we need to do everything we can to undermine them from within. And using our intelligence capabilities seems to be a great idea. So these guys are criminals. They are terrorists in many cases, and using our covert methods to be able to target them, I think is just great news. And so I'm here for it. I'm all for it. Very good stuff over there. The war of the deep state continues. The Defense Secretary Hegseth claims that the Biden IRS targeted him for a rush tax audit. So this is not a surprise. I'm constantly paranoid of this stuff. I always figured that Biden was going to get around to auditing everyone who's powerful in the conservative movement. I don't know if the math is there, but I have no doubt that Hegseth is telling the truth here. But a rushed audit. He posted a set of documents. He was trying to get in front of it, which I think is a smart move on social media, alleging that he owed the IRS $33,000 that needed to be paid. And he wrote, of course, the outgoing Biden IRS rushed an audit of the incoming Secretary of Defense. Total sham. The party of norms and decency strikes again. We will never back down. Yeah, I love this. They're the ones who claim that they're the ones who are in charge of norms, and they just target their political opponents with every element of the government. Those of you who are new to the movement, welcome. But one of the first modern scandals of weaponized government against conservatives was when Barack Obama's IRS targeted Tea Party groups. Tea Party groups were sort of the precursor to MAGA, much more flawed than the MAGA movement, I will say. A lot of grift going on in the Tea Party, but overall a lot of productive stuff as well, to at least have some sort of loose infrastructure to oppose the Obama agenda. And the IRS just flat out targeting conservative groups, Christian groups, anything that was a threat to Obama, and is well documented. You can look it up, spend some time online, getting into it. So I don't doubt that Hegseth's telling the truth, and it's not good. It just reminds you every time they act like we're authoritarians, we're a threat to democracy, yada, yada, yada. They are so much worse. And this came up today. Misty dutifully pulled a clip of Jamie Raskin. We like to check in on Raskin's hair here on the Alex Marlow Show. We want to make sure his hair is in a good spot. My hair is working out today, so I'm happy. Let's see if Raskin can catch me. Here we go.
The most glaring conflict of interest of all is that he is a
Doge.
government contractor himself who collects billions of dollars from the U.S. government. And so then he, claims he finds some objectionable video that somebody produced in video in Peru who also had a grant from the federal government or something like that. And he's talking about $10,000 or something. It's a joke. This guy is taking us for a ride. And like all authoritarian and fascist movements around the world in history, corruption is at the heart of it. It's all about allowing people who have lots of wealth and power to seize ever greater parts of the national wealth.
I mean, the billionaire class ran the Joe Biden administration. His whole cabinet was loaded up with all of these people who just made money in the consultant state, in the consultant class and security state. He had much more support from billionaires than Donald Trump did. It's the Wall Street started to come around to Trump, but Hollywood, Silicon Valley, they were just deeply pro Kamala Harris. So it's just a lie, and all of it is rooted in pretty much nothing. But then he just acts like we're the totalitarians and authoritarians. Trump's getting more popular. People like what Trump is doing. They like what Doge is doing. And so the Democrats have put themselves in this unbelievable position where they're trying to, they're defending every stupid expenditure. This has been the theme of the show for the last few days. The latest one that we learned is millions of dollars, 10 million specifically, for circumcisions in Mozambique. Like, I'm pro circumcision. It's particularly in Africa. There is, the studies, you got to get updated, scientific method, you got to test your hypotheses. But it's certainly one of these things that it seems to have reduced diseases wildly, particularly AIDS. So, but why is the U.S. government paying for them? Why is it our role? What are we getting in return for that? Why is that the standard? The standard needs to be to have other countries elevate. Not have it so they rely on our bureaucracy where all that money's not going to circumcisions. Some of that's going into people's pockets. So it's just a fact. Doge finds this stuff and it's great. But let's put them in a position where they got to defend all this. Doge discovered $4.7 trillion of treasury payments that are almost impossible to trace. This is the whole flaw of why I think that the 2 trillion number we talked about at the start is going to be too low. I think it's going to be much higher. Joni Ernst in our interview last week gave me a very good sense that it's going to be much higher. She said they're already at $250 billion after 3 weeks. So I think they can go much higher. But this is when you start seeing stuff like all this money that they can't trace. Well, what if we just say from here on out, we're going to trace it? And then we find out some more waste next year. I think that's okay. Or the next time we do some sort of a big spending package. This is my point about how none of this is nefarious at all. It's just auditing what is unaccounted for. Just going in, people are talking about, going into Fort Knox, how much gold bars are left. Why not? Just go do an audit once a year. It doesn't have to be it's obsessive every second. Just go once a year and go check out whether or not the balance sheets are adding up to what we're being told. They don't. One of the biggest tells in modern times was when we cut specifically a $100 billion check to Ukraine. There's no way that what Ukraine needed was specifically that round number, 100. It was done at random. It was done out of laziness. That's why we got to that number. And of course, Ukraine didn't get all that money. They got, 40% or whatever. And the rest of it went who knows where. Tucker Carlson would tell you is going to ski resorts. So and I don't have any reason to doubt him. That's what was going on, given the history of Ukraine's corruption. Treasury sent $4.7 trillion in payments, according to Wendell Husabo for us at Breitbart, without an identification code that links a Treasury payment to a budget line item. Do you guys think that's a mistake that happened by accident, or do we think that might be intentional? I mentioned on yesterday's show how all these people in the Social Security Administration were over 100 years old. The numbers are truly awesome. There is several people getting Social Security who are older than the United States of America itself. There's one person in the 360 to 369-year-old category. And then there is one person from the 240 to 249-year-old category. And there's over 1,000 people from the 220 to 229-year-old category. So we got people older than America itself getting Social Security. Who's the longevity guy? What's his name? Brian something? I'm looking at Brian Johnson. The guy's going to live forever. He's going to talk to these people. How you guys making it to 360? Pretty good stuff. That's a good run. getting up to 360 years old. And it's still getting government checks, sophisticated. What's happening here is that before there was the type of technology we had now, people were ripping off people's social security numbers, getting the checks, and they've probably been getting the checks for 50 years. And who knows if they're alive or not. But they started a grift 50 years ago, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, and just keep getting checks. And that's it. But it's stealing. Let's do a full audit. It is millions and millions of people, tens of millions of people over 100 years old getting Social Security, according to Doge. So, and Raskin's now in a place where Democrats got to defend all of it. Good. Make them defend it. All good. We love it. We love to see it. And let's try to see the Democrats go around and explain why whatever they've got is preferable to cleaning up some of those rolls and saving us some money. So we talk about how Social Security, it's a real political football because no one wants to cut it. Social Security payments are huge and they're a huge part of our budget, and they don't totally make sense because they're not really a living wage for, especially you start getting them and then you live another 30 years. You're not really gonna be able to live off of it. So it's a broken system, but no one can really fix it because everyone who's been paying into the system for 50 years wants their checks. And so they don't want to be told that they're not going to have their checks after paying in it for 50 years. So that's going to not be good politically. So maybe you got to fix it a different way. Like, for example, get all the 140-year-olds off the rolls. You go from there. Like, so let's start there. Start fixing it there. All right. Ken Martin, new Democrat leader, is announced a tour. And I got to tell you, I want to sponsor this tour. Misty, can we look into how to do this? I want to sponsor this. I want this to be brought to you by the Alex Marlow Show. Because if this loser goes out on tour for the Democrats, then we're going to get such great content. But let's hear his promo. Here we go.
To start, what's job one?
Right now, it's first off, it's tour that we're kicking off today, actually, which I'm really excited about. When I ran, I said, we need to get the DNC out of D.C. And someone said, well, what do you mean? You're moving the headquarters from D.C.? No, it's a mindset change. It's really focusing back on the states, building a 57-state party strategy up and down the...
Wait a minute, a 57-state party strategy? Okay, hold on. 57-state party strategy? What are we talking about? Last I checked, we had no more than 50 states. Okay, you want to add D.C., okay, 51 territories, maybe Puerto Rico, include that. We're not including stuff like Guam yet. So he's got to be thinking of the great state of Canada here. Maybe he's thinking of the great state of Greenland. Canada is probably going to be 2 states when we take it over. So even there, I'm at 55, 56. Like, how many states do we got?
Ballot, contesting every race in all 3,244 of our counties. We have to be organizing everywhere, which is, by the way, the name of this tour. We're going to be talking with voters, with union members, with farmers, door knocking for candidates, holding listening sessions throughout those red, purple, and blue states that we're visiting this week. We need to get the DNC out of D.C., out of the Beltway, reconnecting our message back with voters. That's job number one.
Okay, so I actually agree that if I was advising Democrats, I would say 100% you guys are a cosmopolitan, metropolitan, regional party at this point, and you need to get out of D.C., which is the most left-wing area, I think, of any major city. I think it's the most left-wing major city. And that's saying something because a lot of Republicans have to live there to do work for Republicans. So there are a lot of Republicans who need staff there. So it's so overwhelmingly left. But what is that message? And that's where we got another 30 seconds in the clip. He's not going to get there, but he's got to actually have a message eventually.
Job number one, right? So many parts of our coalition left us this last election cycle, right? We know that, from Latino voters to working class households to young voters to women. You can go down the list. The only 2 groups that we overperformed with in the last election cycle were wealthy households and college educated voters. That's a damning indictment on the Democratic Party. We got to do a better job. So that's why we're getting out there to these states this week to reconnect our message.
That's also an indictment on the college system, is that if you didn't go to college, then you might actually have some common sense left. You might actually be able to understand that we like stuff like reciprocal trade, where if you're going to tariff us, we tariff you right back at the same level. Trump's new idea. We like the idea of borders. We like the idea of law and order. And Democrats, I guess you go to college and then you learn you don't like that stuff. You would just prefer transing of the kids and gender transition surgeries. So that's what you learn. So speaking of the law and order, I love something else that's happening. Tom Homan says he's asked the DOJ whether Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is impeding ICE. This continued update, I'm giving you micro updates on this. I think this is the third show in a row I brought it up at a loose level, but it really solidified with me why I like this story so much is because of the messaging, because what's happening is broadcasting to the world that we are restoring law and order. Law and order has been under attack. The Democrats hate law and order, something you've heard me say before, and I will say it many times again. They resent it as a concept. They would prefer chaos because they can fill the vacuum that the chaos creates with more power for themselves. That's the logic. That's how it works. And that's how they operate. So when you've got you've got Democrat lawmakers, prominent ones, popular ones, saying we're going to scheme with illegal aliens and with whatever NGOs still have any funding left to make sure that you can evade our laws, you can break our laws. And if we're in a position to look into them and treat them as criminals because they're aiding and abetting crimes, we ought to do that. And it should not be a joke. It should be dead serious. And I'll tell you, if it doesn't work out, it at least sends a message that you better think twice before popping your head up and wanting to deal with the wrath of Tom Homan. It also sends a broader signal around the world that we are going to that we're not going to allow for you to just take advantage of us and break our laws. So Homan's got the exact right approach, as I've said, since the transition. Why he was the only guy out there during the transition doing 1 million interviews. It is because he wants to send this message. And the message is, I know this is a risky thing to say. Don't take me out of context here, which some people do. It's a bigger deal to me than the deportations. And I love the deportations. I hope we have 1 million deportations. I hope we only have the best deportations. But I will say to you that even more important is sending that signal that America is now a law and order based society. If that happens, that's going to stop a lot of the border crossings. It's going to stop a lot of those encounters. It's going to allow for Border Patrol agents to have normal lives. It's going to allow for us to recruit better. And it is just going to be it's going to free us from a lot of the messier elements of immigration enforcement, which is going to involve to some degree breaking up families and picking up people who have put roots down. And all that's going to be a byproduct that's going to happen. It's not fortunate that stuff happens. It's part of it. But what's better is to not let people put their roots down to begin with and to go after the people who are giving safe harbor to and giving the counsel and guidance to the lawbreakers. That's a much easier way to deal with this, and that's exactly what he's doing. All right, cool. Other stuff. This is a big one. Brooke Rollins told us, she's Secretary of Agriculture, new Secretary of Agriculture, told us at Breitbart that she's looking at federal solutions to stopping China from purchasing U.S. farmland. Shocking stuff that Biden let happen. I wrote about this in Breaking Biden, which is aging very well. And I set aside a little snippet from my chapter. Which chapter is this? I should have looked up which chapter this is. This is, this is a good chapter. I got a good chapter name on this one. This is China Joe and the Beijing Bidens. This is a good chapter on Biden's China policy. I wrote about the Chinese farm ownership. Chinese ownership of U.S. farmland increased 14-fold from 13,720 acres in 2010 to 192,000 acres in 2020. So again, I'm not giving free pass to Trump here on this also, but he wasn't quite as focused as he is now. According to the latest available data, 3/4 of all Chinese-owned U.S. farmland is currently owned by Smithfield Foods, a company directly tied to the Chinese government. Smithfield was acquired by the Chinese Shangwei Group, which eventually changed its name to the WH Group, sanitize it, Americanize it. The acquisition took place in 2013 during the Obama-Biden administration, and to date, the $7.1 billion acquisition of Smithfield Foods is the largest purchase of a U.S. company by the Chinese ever recorded, transferring ownership of 460 individual U.S. farms to China. The result was that more than 1 out of every 4 hogs in the United States is now owned by China. That's pretty wild. It gets more wild and revolting. Another revolting part of the deal was that Smithfield allowed China to offshore its hog herds to the United States, which means the Chinese were able to transfer the toxic impact of steaming pits of hog waste to our country. So, Misty, this is where you can get your bleep button ready. Yes, China sent us their hog shit, wrote Marlow. in breaking Biden. And the Obama-Biden administration signed off on it. The WH Group was doubly happy about this because the U.S. farms are subject to less stringent regulation than Chinese-based farms. I'm going to send this to Secretary Rollins. Start right there. It's fun that we can do that. It's fun that we can just send stuff now directly to the White House. Check that out. You should be aware. That's what's going on with the Chinese farms. So it's crackdown. We're getting into it. So much bad legacy of Biden. We just saw the Leonard Peltier release, this guy who shot 2 FBI agents in the head, convicted of it. He got commuted by Biden. He was already on the run for other crimes when he shot 2 agents in the head. And he owned up to being a part of the shootout, but not to the actual murders. And he rode basically the political whims of the time, getting a lot of support from left-wing Hollywood and stuff like that in the 1970s. He had huge support in the Berkeley campus while I was there. So, but all that stuff, all of the Biden's legacy continues. Here's the one on the food stuff. American food stamps could be banned from buying bad food and sugary drinks. Totally true. Look, I've got a libertarian streak. I want people to be able to buy what they want to buy, but we can't be stupid. Is this okay? Can we not be stupid about stuff? I feel like we give ourselves permission to be stupid if we don't want to violate some principle. I like the idea of people being able to spend their own money how they see fit. I think that's better than the alternative. But if you're getting food stamps, you're getting government assistance to buy food, then it would be nice if there was a way to regulate it so you weren't buying total trash. So I live near a truck route driving through California, and there is a lot of fast food around here and a lot of advertisements about the fast food using the EBT cards, the food stamps. And I'm not saying this can be totally avoided. I don't know the exact plan to do it. But I know that when you've got Robert Kennedy in there and he's serious about people's health, then we're talking about using government taxpayer funds confiscated from me and you, given to people who are allegedly in need, and they're using it to turn around to buy some of the least healthy food in the world, then that's not great. Now, how you regulate it, that's the hard part. And that's where my libertarian streak starts, the libertarian angel on my shoulder talking to the shut it all down guy on my other shoulder. But it is hard to, you could start with the sodas, right? I mean, you can't have drinks with over, 50 grams of sugar per 20 ounces. I mean, how much sugar is in a bottle of Coke? 120 ounces? I don't know. 120 grams. It's a massive amount. Stuff's terrible for you. So we only drink the best Diet Coke around here. Full endorsement. Free endorsement for Diet Coke on the Marlow Show. But we can't just have our money taken out of your pocket to buy for stuff that's making us unhealthy when we have a chronic disease crisis, we have an obesity epidemic. We can't be funding that by the government, can we? I know we've done dumber stuff with our health. We kept all those kids home from school during coronavirus. So there's dumber things we've done. But it is not good. I'm glad that we're looking at solutions. So keep an eye on the Democrats, as we are known to do, how they're dealing with the running up the score in Trump's America. We had the AP caught lying about Doge again, and then they stealth edited the article. This was a pretty epic story where they busted some Doge. They said the Doge was attacking someone from their official Facebook page, which was not true because Doge doesn't have an official Facebook page, yet the AP wrote that anyway and published it. And they also falsely claimed that Doge had fired all these air traffic controllers, which had not been fired. So AP, in total desperation, will not refer to the Gulf of America by its rightful name, even if that means that they don't get access to the White House. So clearly some dumb people over there. Media Elite are calling for a boycott of Trump in support of AP speech codes. Fine, please give me this. Please boycott Trump over the speech codes. Just more content for us at Breitbart. We'll break all the stories. Happy to do it. I'm sure Fox will get some interviews. It'll just be us. It'll be Fox and Breitbart. That's fine. I can live that life. Over at The Hill, Juan Williams writes, Trump's idea of competence only white men need apply. Is Juan Williams still at Fox? I mean, I'm not a huge Fox viewer. I check out some of the shows that I'm on. And when something goes viral online, but there's not a lot of viral Juan Williams. Yeah, he's still at Fox. Only white men apply. Did Lyndon McMahon get that memo, and Tulsi Gabbard and Kristi Noem and Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Marco Rubio. How about Musk? I mean, Musk, he's pretty translucent, but he's an African-American now. Kash Patel, unbelievable. So it's all these most Susie Wiles. He keeps elevating, at least Stefanik, all these women and all these minorities, and just you can't win. That's why, hey, they call my old boss Larry Elder, my colleague on Salem, the black white supremacist, like that old Chappelle sketch. So they're so lost, they're so desperate. One of my favorite media figures, also sort of a scary guy, is named Frank Figliuzzi, who is the MSNBC's FBI authority. So they haul him in when they need to talk about FBI type issues. And I'm going to show you what he was up to, how he's talking about all of you Trump supporters in the audience.
Yeah, we're watching Exhibit A for an unmitigated desire for power and influence and relevancy. That's who surrounds Donald Trump right now. People who literally can't get another job without kissing his rear end. And this Reince Priebus clip that you played, Nicole, nothing to see here, as Angela said. Don't worry, remain calm. He occasionally likes to take a grenade out and throw it on the floor to see what happens. I'll tell you what happens when you play with a live grenade and toss it on the floor. Eventually it explodes. And the only question for us is whether it's going to explode back on Trump or explode and hurt the rest of us. And my money's on both, by the way. People are going to get hurt, and eventually it will blow back on Trump. And then, with regard to this statement, which again, we shall not believe Reince Priebus when he says, don't worry, that someone who saves his country cannot violate a law. Okay, it's been attributed by some historians who aren't certain to Napoleon, but I'll tell you where it's definitely been used far more recently, and that's with a white supremacist, far-right extremist named Anders Breivik in Norway.
Yeah, Breivik was the guy that had the worst mass shooting of children ever in history, and Figliuzzi is attaching that to Trump. So just let you know, Trump has got all these grandkids that he loves and loves him back. And this is saving women's sports single-handedly. He's also secretly a huge fan of this mass murderer, white supremacist, who shot up children. They allow this guy on MSNBC to talk. I think he's a paid guy, too. So before I go on, I'll mention Figliuzzi. I became obsessed with him when he suggested that Trump had a bunch of pro-Hitler code with a lot of his maneuvering in his first administration. Suggesting that he had raised a flag on 8/8, which is August the 8th, as a tribute to Hitler and Heil Hitler, as a nod to the white supremacist movement. And he's continued to just do this sort of we're all getting taken over by Nazis cosplay on MSNBC for a long time, and they keep letting him on. So clearly the suits over at NBC, Comcast, Universal have not gotten the picture that America has moved on from this stuff, and they trust Trump and they think he's popular. So, but no, he's out there saying that Trump actually he's not quoting Napoleon. He's really quoting white nationalist child killer. That's really who Trump identifies with.
Norway, who killed 77 people in Norway, the worst modern mass murder in Norwegian history, including a mass murder, 2 separate incidents by him on the same day, including a mass murder at a kids' camp in Norway. And he's the one who describes himself as a neo-Nazi who's used that statement more recently in history. And now our president is quoting that white supremacist neo-Nazi murderer. If you voted for that, you really need to question whether you're American. You
really need to question if you're American. That's it. That's what I wanted. So you're not American, guys. So if you voted for Trump, then you're not American, because Trump successfully trolled them yet again. He trolled them yet again. This is a fake Napoleon quote. It's not a real quote. It's probably from the movie. We have a great article from John Carney of Breitbart. I brought this up in yesterday's show, so forgive me for repeating myself, but you got to do it. You got to hammer these points home sometimes. So Trump he baits them all. He gets them all. He gets whatever it is. He gets all the cockroaches out and just into the sunlight so you can see who they are. And if you guys are not familiar with Figliuzzi, if you've been with me for a while, you're familiar with him. But if you're not familiar with him, then you should be now. And you should know that this is what they put on NBC News as a commentary. This is what they do. This is what they're up to. All right, President Trump is moving at lightning speed in his first weeks in office with executive orders, new policies, promises kept. It can be hard to keep up until now. Subscribe to the Trump Report. This daily email brings you highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Get all the details on the administration's top actions that day with in-depth analysis. You stay up to date on what President Trump is doing to make America great again. Subscribe to the Trump Report today at salempodcastnetwork.com/Trump. That's salempodcastnetwork.com/Trump. Get that up-to-the-minute email every single day with Salem. All right, aloha at alexmarlow.com. If you want to be a part of the show, if you want to correspond with me, I got some great email. I'm having a hard time getting some of the silly ones. I need to be more disciplined about this. Misty, you're going to have to coach me on this. We got Wicked star Cynthia Erivo, who's a queer woman, is going to play Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ Superstar. I mean, that's a fun troll, right? From the left, we could talk about. A tourist lost both hands trying to take photos with the shark and the Turks and Caicos. Why would people do this? Like, why is this? Why do you? I'm just so that wiring is just, I can't relate to it at all. Just feels like, just feels like I got to take a photo with a shark. I'd be scared to death of this stuff. It's funny because I'm not a unbrave person. I'm in a relatively brave line of work. I offer myself up to your mercy every day in the audience. You guys could dunk on me and humiliate me, but I don't have anything close to that type of physical bravery that I'm going to go up to this shark and risk losing my hands for the rest of my life so that I can get a snap. So if you guys want to illuminate why people are like that, I'm all for it. But I got some email. I'm going to go through it. Let's see. What do we got? First up today, David Johnson. Alex, you take a serious subject that's often avoided when you speak about sin. I applaud you for that. The idea that everything is okay has been the downfall of societies throughout our history. However, please do not omit the primary lesson of Christianity, which is forgiveness. David is definitely reacting to my commentary on Elon Musk yesterday and his odd approach to the family, where he's just trying to spread his genetic footprint far and wide. And it's a dicey thing for us in MAGA world because we love what he's doing with Doge and we like the idea of lots of children, but also we like the idea of the nuclear family. And it's something I spent about 14, 15 minutes walking through my take on this, which I know it's a lot to ask of the audience to, listen to it, but it is the Alex Marlow Show. So that's kind of what we do here. So I share what I think about things. But yeah, I'm very much tolerant. I'm very much forgiving, but I also want children to have fathers, and he's not going to be present. And I think that that's worth pointing that out, but it doesn't mean he can't do good with Doge. It doesn't mean he's not a free person and that adults can't engage in certain behaviors and be free to do so. But clearly the baby mom is not happy with him. And I just don't think it's a virtue of his character. I think that it's superior. Instead of just spreading your genetic code all around the world, I think it'd be better to be more present with the children you've already created. But that's just me. That's my take. And you can disagree. And you can also agree with me and still think the Doge initiative is historic and amazing. You can even like his rockets and his electric cars. So that was the conversation. I highly encourage everyone, if you missed it, to go back and check that out. But just addressing certain things as out-of-wedlock pregnancies as sinful is simple and clarifying and important to do that. That said, I do like this final point about forgiveness. Absolutely. This is why I like podcasting relative to tweeting stuff, because you lose a lot of the nuance, you lose a lot of the emotion in it if you're just tweeting. I very much am tolerant and forgiving of people who have a let's say non-traditional family circumstances. I understand it, and we can always make a better decision. Later in the day, we could have sinned this morning and make a better decision next time, which could come up right away. In a way, if you approach your life that way, you can't mess things up too bad. Because if you always look at it, okay, I made a mistake, but if I can move forward and not make that mistake again, and I can really do my best in that way, then your life can always improve. And I think that's a great way to live. So definitely pro forgiveness, but also I'm pro fathers being in the home. And somehow that was lost in the conversation up until yesterday. All right, Dave Traub. No disrespect here. I exclusively listen to your show on YouTube daily, along with Victor Davis Hanson, Mark Smith, Matt Boyle, and Joe Solomon. If you aspire to Russia's level, and I think it's possible, you should consider this. Rush Limbaugh mocked liberals almost always within the context of making a larger point, usually disclosing liberals' hidden agendas that were not obvious. Thus, Rush was never thought of as being small or vindictive. You, on the other hand, mock liberals often within the context of winning the culture wars, an objective that is important but is more purely insulting for insult's sake. I suspect that some of this arises from the same reasons that you often took issue with and spent time on a Southwest custom using "how are you" as a greeting and not a real question. Okay, so let me get to. I'll address that point, then we'll go back. So early days of my radio show, when I would take calls, for the sake of time, I would encourage people not to say "how are you," because then I would say "I'm fine," or I would say "I'm fine, how are you?" And then they would reply back with some not real answer, and then we waste a bunch of time. And I was trying to keep the shows moving so that people don't change and put on Howard Stern. So it was sort of a competitive thing. The other thing is I'm not good at small talk. This is a personal thing. I'm an introvert by nature, which is, people don't understand this for people who perform publicly, but a lot of us actually are introverted. And so if you ask me how I'm doing, I'm probably going to give you an answer, because I don't do the, oh yeah, the weather is really something today. It's nice. I can't do that. It's very, I can, and I can learn it, and I've tried to do it, but it's not comfortable for me. I'm much more comfortable actually expressing to you how I think, how I feel. Like that's better. That's a better way to communicate. So if you ask me how I'm doing, I'm probably going to give you an answer. And so it's weird to get the question when you're calling into my 3-hour talk show, because I'm certainly going to share with you how I'm doing during that time. So you're going to know exactly how I'm doing during the show. So I admit, though, it didn't really work, me asking people to stop saying "how are you?" So I dropped it, and I dropped this many years ago. But I guess Dave Traub has been with me for a really long time and still resents that position I took, that I didn't want "how are you" at the beginning of a call in the talk show. But very interesting to bring that up. Again, no disrespect, he writes. I only write because I'm a big fan and very happy you are back. Dave, no doubt you're a big fan. I appreciate the conscientious criticism. I can always handle criticism when it comes from a good place and a conscientious place. His assessment of my use of mockery and ridicule relative to Rush's is entirely spot on. Rush would, I think more often than Dave is letting on, would just mock liberals for the sake of it. And he got himself into trouble doing that quite a bit. I made a point in my early days of commentary broadcasting, anything public, I would say, to really only reserve mockery, ridicule for the left when they super duper deserved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I still usually am only doing it when I'm returning the favor. People who treat us like we're Nazis, people who treat us like we're criminals. I try to reserve it for that. I'm a little more liberal these days because I've realized as a tactic, the left weaponized mockery and ridicule in a much more effective way than we have on the right. You know, we were just talking about yesterday SNL's 50th anniversary, where SNL traditionally more biased, less biased than some other Hollywood products, but overall a brand that is associated with mocking conservatives, promoting liberals, and they thrived. You know, they go half a century of making conservatives punching bags. So the left has mined so much humor out of us, and they don't wait for our permission. They've just wielded that tool. And I have some moral issues with initiating, but I think for the most part, I'm mocking people who are putting themselves out there. I'm not trying to dox people. I'm not trying to expose people who are not putting themselves out there. But if you're going to put yourself out there, I have drawn the conclusion that from time to time, you're going to get mocked and insulted because it is that effective. And I think about preserving the country matters to me slightly more than preserving everyone's every last bit of dignity that they have. So I would like for people to have some dignity, of course, but these are competing good values here. Me trying to beat the left in the culture war is very important. And I think the conservatives of yesteryear were able to avoid that, and they didn't work. We lost a lot. We had a lot of bad guys win. Rush, I think, was very good at it, but some of my favorite talk show hosts just would refuse to ever insult liberals. I don't agree. I don't agree. I try to reserve it for when they really deserve it, but I'm not going to be perfect in that way. But thank you for the feedback. And just know that I am being conscious about it. I'm not trying to take cheap shots. You don't get a lot of cheap shots on the show unless it's super funny. All right. Last one for today. Let's see. Alex in Clearwater, Florida. Alex, you're spot on with the turtleneck. So I came after the turtleneck guys yesterday, not just the Q-zips, coming after the turtleneck. Kamala had one on. It looked terrible. It's a horrific look. Pairing the turtleneck with the sport coat is maybe the worst use of the turtleneck. And this look seems to be very popular on the NFL pregame sets for some unknown reason. I guess so they don't have to wear ties. Turtleneck wearers deserve to be mocked and ridiculed. My expression. That's the only way it will stop. However, they got people to stop however they got people to stop smoking. Use that method. Wow. You'd have to ban it. Get the Surgeon General out there. Banning turtlenecks. I don't understand it. Please help me. Please tell me how the turtleneck works. The Q-zip is much more understandable to me than the turtleneck because the Q-zip at least is a neutral, and the Q-zip is a practical purpose. You know, you put on at the golf course, it makes sense. So one of you recommended a golf clothing line to me on yesterday's show that we talked about, and they had the Q-zip. I understand it. It's too generic, too vanilla for me. I want to have a little more pop. And so I'm not going to go for it. But the turtleneck just deliberately looks bad. It looks like you're intentionally looking bad. It reminds me of the David Beckham not hair thing, the David Beckham hat where he wear the beanie. He'd wear the skiing beanie, but he'd be at the Laker game. And I feel like he was almost trying to dumb down his appearance because it's almost like he'd be too handsome. Brad Pitt would do the same thing. I've seen Leonardo DiCaprio do this with the ball cap. You put on the cap because you're almost too handsome and it's almost uncomfortable for people. So you have to make yourself look stupid or annoying or ugly to some degree. So you pick the ugliest, most shapeless hat and you put it on. That to me is a turtleneck. There's no other explanation. I don't get it. I've never seen it look good. I've never seen anyone pull it off. So yet you still see it pop up, and even rich, stylish people on ESPN, you do see him wearing the turtleneck with the jacket. I don't get it. It's deliberately offensive. It's offending me. I'm offended by the turtleneck. So, and I still own, I think, 2 Q-zips. To be perfectly honest with you, they're for athletic purposes. I think they're pretty stylish. So my Q-zip tolerance, I think, is actually higher than the turtleneck. I do not own a turtleneck. And I think I've only owned one, and it did not go well. I deserved any mockery I got for it. So that's it. Donate your turtlenecks, Goodwill, tax write-off. There you go. That's it. That's the Alex Marlow Show today. Aloha at alexmarlow.com. Thanks to Misty. Thanks for leaving comments. Thanks for telling people about the broadcast. That's a big deal. And we'll talk to you tomorrow.